Today we continue Sutavanta Sutta. According to the answers given by the Venerable Sariputra in the Silavanta Sutta, a bhikkhu meditators who is virtuous or whose sila, moral conduct is pure, should practice vipassana meditation to see the five aggregates of clinging, upadana khanda, as impermanence, as suffering, as disease, as non-self, etc. Immediately following this Silavanta Sutta in the Samyutta Nikaya, there is a discourse called Sutavanta Sutta. Sutavanta, Sutavanta Sutta. We can regard the Sutavanta Sutta as a sister sutta, as the text is the same as the Silavanta Sutta. The only difference being that a bhikkhu meditator here is Sutavanta, an instructed monk or knowledgeable monk, knowledgeable meditators. The word Sutta means hut. In ancient times, writing materials were not easily available, and it may have been customary in those days not to write down the teaching of the Buddha. So the teacher taught and the student learned by listening to his talk. This is how the word sutta came to mean something a person has learned, and Sutavanta means one possesses knowledge through learning, meditators who is knowledgeable. In this discourse, Venerable Mahakutika asked Venerable Sariputra the same question as in the Silavanta Sutta. What are the things an instructed bhikkhu should carefully attend to? And the answer is also the same. An instructed bhikkhu or a knowledgeable meditator who has the necessary knowledge of the Buddha teaching should carefully attend to the five aggregates of clinging, as impermanence, as suffering, as disease, as non-self, etc. So these two suttas, Silavanta Sutta and Sutavanta Suttas, may be regarded as one. So today we recite Sutavanta Sutta. We just change Silavanta. Instead of Silavanta, you have to say Sutavanta. Instead of virtuous, you have to translate instructed or knowledgeable. So look at the same paper, Silavanta Sutta. We change Sutavanta. Can you follow me? Sutavanta Uso Sariputra Bhikkhuna Kadame Dhamma Yoni So Manasi Kadaba Sutavanta Uso Sariputta Vekuna Katame Dhamma Yoniso Manasikatava. Answer instead of Silavata, you have to say Sutavanta Uso. Sutavanta Uso Kutika Vekuna Pinju Parane Kanda Aneja Dogado, Rogado, Gandado, Sanlado, Agado, Abadado, Parado, Palogado, Sonyado, Anadado, Yoniso Manasigadaba. Only just change Silavata instead of Silavata, Sutavata. Recite together. Sutavata Uso Sariputta Vekuna Katame Dhamma Yoniso Manasikatava. Answer. Sutavata Uso Kutika Vekuna Pinjuparane Kanda Aneja Rogado Gandado Sanlado Agado Abadado Parat Palogado Sunyado Anadado Yonisa Manasigadava. Again. Sutavanta Uso Sariputta Vekuna Katame Dhamma Yoniso Manasigadava. Asa Sutavanta Uso Kutika Vekuna Nejado Dogado Rogado Gandado Sanlado Agado Avadado Parado Palogado Sunyado Anadado Yoniso Manasigadava. Translation, follow me. Friends Sariputta, what are the things that an instructed bhikkhu should carefully attend to? Answer. Frank Kutika. An instructed bhikkhu should carefully attend to the five aggregates subject to clinging as impermanent, as suffering, as a disease, as tumor, as death, as misery, as affliction, as alien, as dissolution, as empty, as non-self. Meditators must be knowledgeable. How much knowledge meditator must have? At one time, Saka, the kings of deities, the kings of God, asked the Buddha, how much knowledge a monk meditator must have in order to practice and reach arahantship? You want to attain arahantship? So he asked this question. And Buddha said, Sabbe Dhamma Nalam Biniwesaya. Biniwesaya. A bhikkhu meditator has said that all things are not fit to be clung to. When meditator has said that all things are not fit to be adhered to, he or she directly knows everything. That means that after hearing that all phenomena are unfit to be adhered to by craving or by wrong view, you can practice meditation. So a meditator needs to hear only this much. You need to hear that all things are not to be taken as permanence. All things are not to be taken as happiness. All things are not to be taken as self. You need to hear only this. If you know just this much, you can practice meditation. According to this, meditator does not have to know much about the teaching of the Buddha in order to practice meditation. The commentary adds a little more. It said that if meditator knows there are four noble truths, and that the first two truths and Samudaya Sija belong to the rounds of rebirth, Vutta Sija, evolution, the rounds of rebirth, and the other two, Nirodha and Mega Sija, leads to release from the rounds of rebirth. You may practice meditation, only the first two. You may practice meditation Dukkha Sija and Samudaya Sija. If you know this much, you have enough knowledge to practice meditation. You're very familiar the Four Noble Truth, Dukkha Sija, truth of suffering, Samudaya Sija, the origin of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, Nirodha Sija, the truth of the cessation of suffering, Mega Sija, the truth of the path leading to the cessation of suffering. And the first two, Dukkha and Samudaya, are mundane, and Nirodha and Mega are supramundane. When we practice Vipassana, we deal only with the first two, Dukkha and Samudaya Sija, which are mundane. The truth of suffering must be understood. We need to understand the truth of suffering. So when you encounter, when you experience suffering, whole mass of suffering, we need to accept it. We do not create any suffering, but suffering is there. When suffering comes, we need to be aware. And the origin of suffering must be eradicated. And the third noble truth of the cessation of suffering is to be realized. And the fourth noble truth, the noble truth of the path to cessation, arises at the moment of enlightenment. and it is the result of the practice of vipassana meditation. If you know this much, you have enough knowledge to practice vipassana meditation. And what about understanding dependent origination? It has been explained in great detail in the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification. In this case, the sub-commentary is helpful. It says that if you know that there is a cause and there are results of the cause, then you know dependent origination. Even if you don't know the details of dependent origination, if you know that there are causes and the results of those causes, and they are related as cause and effect, if you know that, you are said to virtually have knowledge of dependent origination. In brief, dependent origination teach that nama rupa in us, the material and mental states in beings always arise dependent on condition. According to this teaching, everything in this world is conditioned. So if you know only that there are conditions, and that there are those conditioned by those conditions, it is enough to say that you virtually understand Paticca Samuppada, dependent origination. So this information is from the text, commentaries, and sub-commentaries. For those who have no knowledge of the text and no knowledge of the text and commentaries, but who have some ability to think, let us consider this fact. 2 months after his enlightenment, Buddha gave Dhammacikkappavattana Sutta to the 5 disciples. What do you think? Those 5 disciples already knew about such thing as the Four Noble Truths, the aggregates, the bases, or dependent origination? Can you say that these 5 disciples knew Abhidhamma from previous knowledge? And some people might say those 5 disciples had accumulated a lot of paramis, a lot of perfection, and many experience in the past. They were special, they were gifted person. So when they heard the Buddha sermon, all of that information might already have been in them. But we can say that those 5 disciples definitely did not possess any such knowledge. These discoveries from the Buddha were unknown to any other human beings until Buddha gave the 5 disciples his first sermon at Isipatana. So the disciple who had no prior knowledge of aggregates, dependent origination and so forth, learned by listening to the Buddha's first sermon. As a result of listening, all of them became Sotapannas, and little later they became Arahants. We can find many such examples in the text as well as in the commentaries. One more example, Venerable Sariputta was not yet a Buddhist when he met the Venerable Assaji, one of the 5 disciples of the Buddha. At that time, he belonged to the sect of another teacher, and he knew very little about the Buddha teaching. But impressed by the demeanor of Venerable Assaji, he asked Venerable to teach him something of the Dharma. The Venerable Assaji uttered an instructive verse of 4 lines, Ye Dhamma Hetu Bhavawa, etc. And after listening to just the first 2 lines of the verse, Sariputta became Sotapanna. And not long afterwards, he became disciple of the Buddha. As Sariputta was the most gifted person after the Buddha, it was not difficult for him to get this knowledge the moment he received the teaching from the Venerable Assaji. However, we are not so gifted as the 5 disciples of Venerable Sariputta. We are here more than 2,500 years after the Buddha. And we should know something about teaching of the Buddha, but not very much. If you know that there are 5 aggregates, Rupa aggregate, Vedana aggregate, Sinya aggregate, Sankara aggregate, and Vijnana aggregate. 5 aggregates that these 5 aggregates are impermanent, suffering, and non-self. And there are 4 noble truths. If you have heard or already know those things, you can practice Vipassana meditation. It is very encouraging to practice meditation. Knowledge of the aggregates is very helpful because you can verify your practice with what you already know. When you practice meditation, you experience many things, and sometimes you don't know what they are. But if you have sound knowledge of all the aggregates, you will know what is happening to you and what you are experiencing. Also, since you are practicing under the guidance of a teacher, it is enough if you have just a little bit of information about the teaching of the Buddha. teacher can give you enough information about the five aggregates, mind and matter, and so forth. So it is all right for you to practice vipassana meditation, even if you have not read the Visuddhimagga, the path of purification, even if you don't know Vidama, your teacher will supply you with this kinds of knowledge and whatever else is necessary to know. We are not saying this to discourage you from studying the teaching of the Buddha. It is very good to study the teaching of the Buddha. It is good to know what the Buddha taught. But if you bent on practice, we want you to know that it is possible for you to practice right now, even without detailed knowledge of the teaching of the Buddha. But if you want to share your knowledge with other people, if you hope to be a teacher in the future, or if you are a teacher now, then certainly you will need to acquire wide knowledge of the Buddha's teaching. Now we go back to the answer given by the Venerable Sariputra when he said that a virtuous meditators and an instructed or knowledgeable meditators should carefully attend to the five aggregates subject to clinging, which are impermanent, suffering, and disease, non-self. The commentary say that we should know three things regarding anicca. What is it that is impermanent? We say impermanent, impermanent. But what is it that we say is impermanent? And what are the signs or marks of being impermanent? We should know the characteristics, marks or signs of impermanence. And what is repeated seeing of impermanence? What is anicca? What is anicca lakkhana? What is anicca nupassana? And what is it that is impermanent? When we say impermanent, what do we mean by that? You already know the answer. Aniccanti khandapyasakam. The five aggregates are impermanent. And five aggregates are taught by the Buddha as impermanence. You have yet to see that is true. But through practice of vipassana meditation, it will eventually be seen. So what is it that is impermanent? The answer is all five aggregates. All five aggregates, all five khandhas. Not just five aggregates of clinging, not just five aggregates of clinging, upadana khanda, or khanda. So khanda and upadana khanda are different. When we say aggregates of clinging, upadana khanda, we mean only the mundane aggregates. But when we say aggregates, when we say khanda, supramundane aggregates are also included. Supramundane are also impermanent. So both mundane aggregates and supramundane aggregates are impermanent. Path consciousness also impermanent. Megajeta, path consciousness belongs to the supramundane aggregates. It also belongs to the consciousness aggregates, and it also belongs to the supramundane level. But path consciousness arises and disappears immediately, to be followed by fruition consciousness, palajita, which again disappears immediately. So megaphala arise and disappear. So the types of consciousness that are included in the supramundane aggregates are also impermanent. When we speak of impermanence, we mean that everything in the world is impermanent. But in the language of Buddhist book, we say the five aggregates instead of everything in the world. Why do we say that the five aggregates are impermanent? What can we see that causes us to say they are impermanent? There must be signs or there must be characteristics that point to their impermanence. These signs are like flags by which we understand that the five aggregates are impermanent. You all know those characteristics. According to the Visuddhimagga, rise, fall, and change. Rise, fall, change are the characteristics of impermanence. First, there is arising, upada, and there is what is called change, or becoming different, or aging, titi. And then there is falling, there is disappearing, binga, upada, titi, binga. In watching the aggregates, you see that they arise and last for a few brief moments and then disappear. When you see that they constantly arise, change, and disappear, you know from these characteristics or signs that the aggregates are impermanent. And you know that the characteristics of impermanence are rise, fall, and change. You may be familiar with the three stages of existence: arising, staying for a time, staying for that moment, and then disappearing. They are known as the three sub-moments of one thought moment. When you see a state of mind arise, stay for a time, and then disappear, you know that this state is impermanent. This knowing or seeing that something is impermanent must come from your own experience. This knowledge must not come from a book. It must not come from a teacher. This knowledge must come from within yourself. So we should not be satisfied with what we read in the books, what we hear from the Dhamma talk. We must see for ourselves. In order to see impermanence, as Venerable Sariputta did, practice is necessary. You need to do something to prove to yourself that things are really impermanent. So what should we do? It is very simple. We should watch things, we should contemplate things, including the mind. Just watch them. You cannot fail to see that they arise and disappear. So now you are closely observing these aggregates happening. When practicing Vipassana meditation, sometimes you are making notes of your mind. Your mind wanders when you are noting the rising, falling, sitting, touching. And you say wandering, wandering, until it is finished. Then you come back to the home object, sitting, touching, sitting, touching. So through your own experience, you see for yourself that wandering mind is impermanent. Because it arises, stay for a very short time, and then disappear. The impermanence of the five aggregates, the impermanence of mind and matter, can be seen for yourself through the practice of Vipassana meditation. Having seen the impermanence of things for yourself, there's no need to go by faith and blindly accept the statement of other people regarding the impermanence of the five aggregates. You yourself will be able to verify that it is true. If you practice and pay close attention to the objects appearing at the present moment, you cannot fail to see impermanence. It is very encouraging when through your own experience you can discover the secret of mind and matter as discovered by the Buddha. That is what is called Sandetika. an attribute of the Dhamma. Santetika means Dhamma are to be seen by oneself and not just heard second hand from other person. And the commentary describes these characteristics in another way. Although it means the same thing, it said that non-existence after having been is the characteristics of impermanence. Book language is different from everyday language, and sometimes it is used to impress other people. So when I say non-existence after having been, Hotwa Abhavato is the characteristics of impermanence. You may be wondering what I'm saying. If you want to impress people, use the language of the books, but it may not serve the purpose. We want people to understand rather than to admire our knowledge of the books. So whatever we want to say should be put in a way that everybody will understand. Disappearing after arising is the characteristics of impermanence. Disappearing after arising. You understand very well. When it arises, you watch closely. It disappear or not disappear? Definitely disappear. It is the characteristics of impermanence. Now you understand very easily. If you want to know whether a certain state is permanent or impermanent, watch closely. If it disappears after arising, it is more important to see the disappearing than the arising. That is because if you see only the arising and not the disappearing, you may have the opposite understanding and think the state is permanent. So it is important to see the disappearing. However, disappearing is preceded by arising. When there is no arising, there can be no disappearing. So the two go together, arising and disappearing. When you see a state arise and disappear, you know that it is impermanent. So disappearing after arising is the characteristic mark or signs of impermanence. And the third question to be considered is, what is repeated signs? What is repeated sign of impermanence? That is described as contemplation of impermanence, anicca nupassana. You already know the word anicca as impermanence. The word anupassana is made up of anu and pasana. Anu means again and again. Kaya kaya nupasi, vedana su vedana nupasi, citta citta nupasi, dhamme su dhamma nupasi. You have to watch the body again and again. You have to watch the feeling again and again, not one time. One time you watch, you contemplate, you just escape only that moment. But other time you not contemplate, you not escape from mental defilements. So anew means again and again. Pasana means seeing. So anupassana means seeing again and again, repeated seeing or repeated observation, but it is popularly translated as contemplation. When anicca nupassana is translated as contemplation, we may think that it means just thinking about impermanence, but that is not really seeing it. We can force ourselves to seem to understand by saying impermanent, 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 but that is not real understanding of impermanence either. We must be careful not to deceive ourselves with false assumption. Sometimes people say, oh, it is impermanence, it is impermanent, and they think that they really know the impermanence of something. Actually, what they are doing is just repeating like parrots. The real impermanence that we need to see in order to gain vipassana knowledge is the moment-to-moment impermanence. The other kinds of superficial impermanence can be understood without meditation. The person drop a glass and it breaks, and he say, oh, it is impermanent. He don't need meditation to understand the kinds of impermanence. He just know it. And when somebody dies, he say, oh, he is impermanent. That kinds of understanding is not called vipassana knowledge. It cannot lead to dispassion towards the five aggregates. Without dispassion towards the five aggregates, there can be no fading away of mental defilements, no attainment of enlightenment. Superficial understanding of impermanence cannot help us to be dispassionate towards the aggregates or disenchanted with our mind and matter. It will not lead to enlightenment. This kind of understanding cannot help us, so it is very important to cultivate and gain the deeper understanding of real impermanence, not the superficial impermanence. Anicca nupassana is the repeated scenes of impermanence while you are observing the rise and fall of the aggregates. It is not understanding just by thinking or without observing the five aggregates. It is, if it is real anicca nupassana, it must be seen of impermanence while you are in the process of watching the rise and fall of the aggregates during vipassana meditation. If you are not practicing, there can be no anicca nupassana. You may have had real experience of anicca nupassana during your practice of vipassana meditation, but when you are out of practice, there is no anicca nupassana. There can be only the remembrance or memory of anicca nupassana. There are three characteristics of phenomenal existence: anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanence, suffering, and non-self. It is said that even when there is no Buddha in the world, impermanence and suffering can be taught, but nobody except the Buddha can teach anatta, non-self. But there is a statement of the Buddha himself in one of the texts. He said that when one characteristic is seen, the other two are also seen. That means when you see the anicca, you can see dukkha and anatta. When you see the impermanence, you also see suffering nature and non-self nature. However, it is said that anatta can be taught by Buddhas only. So when there are no Buddhas, can you really get anicca nupassana? Can anicca nupassana be taught? The sub-commentary makes the statement and say that the kinds of impermanence taught when there is no Buddha must just be superficial impermanence, not real moment-to-moment impermanence. Because if you see moment-to-moment impermanence when there is no Buddha, you also will see the non-self nature without the Buddha. So the sub-commentary say that even the impermanence and suffering said to be taught during the time when there is no Buddha must be just superficial anicca and superficial dukkha, not the real anicca and dukkha that we see through vipassana meditation. Now you are practicing meditation. What you are seeing is not superficial, moment-to-moment impermanence and real impermanence. You can experience yourself. So nature and dukkha notes we have to read. Which page? Look at your paper. Page number 5, number 12. Nature and dukkha, number 12. Can you follow me? Number 12. Rise, fall, and change are the characteristics of impermanence. Rise, fall, and change are the characteristics of impermanence. 13. Disappearing after arising is the characteristics of impermanence. Disappearing after arising is the characteristics of impermanence. So number 12 and 13, read together. Rise, fall, and change are the characteristics of impermanence. Disappearing after arising is the characteristics of impermanence. Okay? Rise, fall, and change are the characteristics of impermanence. Okay, we have to stop our discussion for today. By practicing vipassana meditation, by observing the five aggregates of clinging continuously and meticulously, may all yogis see the moment-to-moment impermanence, real impermanence, not superficial impermanence. May all yogis be liberated from all suffering. May all meditators realize their real peace in the very near future.